Okay, like I said, we're slowly admitting everyone, but I wanted to thank you all for joining virtually for our Ventura River Watershed Council meeting. This is our main meeting with our consultants with the Ventura River Watershed Resilience Project. And okay, I love the flow of people coming in, and I'm just like clicking over and over again.
And
But
should I just
yeah, go
mention
ahead,
while
Lynn.
you're doing that, for everybody to put their name and organization in the chat so that we have a record if it was at the meeting?
Great. It's exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay, sorry.
No, that was perfect. Um, yeah, so for those of you who just logged on, put your name and organization in the chat for records. And it looks like there's so many people on for this meeting. So first, usually we do a like verbal introductions, but I think we're going to just stick with a chat introduction for today. Um, okay. Does anybody on our project team like to say anything just for maybe like 30 more seconds while we let people come in and then I'll start sharing slides?
I'd like to say that if you are on and you don't see a critical partner, please ping them and remind them that we have the WRP Watershed Council meeting today. They may have just forgotten.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay. All right, I'll start sharing slides. So we have our watershed agenda, but we have a little bit of an overview slide in our slide deck, so I'll just stick with that.
As one of the folks who's going to help facilitate later, if you have a minute, please hover over the three dots next to your name in the list of participants and make sure your name is visible. I don't know all of you, and so I apologize in the future if I'm going to have to call you by your acronym or your company name or whatever you happen to have in that list.
Mhm. Yeah, I actually we can kind of retract a little bit. I skipped the inclusion aspect of this group, and so are there any like general Watershed Council announcements? This is a good time before we dive into the Watershed Resilience Plan for any partner to raise their hand or just unmute yourselves and share an update or an announcement that you have going on. Pause for a moment. I see one hand. It's Jamie. What? Jamie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that we have some positions posted to our website. So Ventura County Resource Conservation District is looking to hire individuals who are well balanced and who can contribute to our teams across our strategic priorities, hence the balance. But we're looking for somebody with a primary focus on in agriculture with an emphasis on soil and climate resilience. And then we're also looking for a regional programs coordinator. So someone who has broad experience, facilitation, coordination, watershed-wide programs. So please visit our website if you want additional information about those positions. So the positions close March 31st. So please share with your network.
That was a great announcement. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? Things going on? Um, I guess let's start with our like introductions, at least from our project team for the WRP. There will be a couple people speaking today, so Lauren, obviously, your watershed coordinator and working with the RCD and have been helping support the WRP project as best as I can. You'll hear from Lara and Lynn, who are project managers. Do you want to do a brief introduction?
Good morning.
I don't, good morning. Yeah.
Morning, everyone.
And I think Mike and Anna just,
Hi, everybody. Mike Gantos. I'm a watershed social scientist with Stantec. I've been excited to be part of the project team on the WRP, and I'll be coming in a little bit later to facilitate some discussion amongst all of you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Yip. I'm with Rincon Consultants, which was one of the kind of technical lead consulting firms that was supporting Jamie, the RCD, Lynn, Laura on the WRP, the Ventura River Watershed Resilience Plan project that we're so excited to present to you today.
we are. Okay, thank you guys so much. I'm ready to share the screen. Is this visible?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Many of you are in our advisory group and may have heard some of this information before, but this is our general committee meeting, and so we'll be updating you all on like an overview of our project. So the overview of today, we'll do the Watershed Resilience Plan overview, talk about some key milestones, talk about some of our technical strategies. We'll introduce the review process because the WRP is now available on our Watershed Council website for review, and there is a form to fill out to submit those. And then we will have some reflections and discussions on what's next and looking ahead to implementation. So I hope to hear input from this group. Thank you all for joining today, and I will pass it along to Lynn and Lara to talk more about the plan.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. Lynn Rodriguez, project manager with Laura on this very exciting project. We're really excited to be at this phase finally, so that you can all take a look at the results of all the hard work of all the people who've been involved since we started this, including you. Just as a reminder, the Watershed Council is serving as the network for this grant. And we were fortunate to have such a long history of collaboration amongst our group to help leverage the work that we needed to do as part of this pilot project. So you've seen some of this before, but I just wanted a quick recap, especially if there's anybody new on today, that the purpose of the pilots, the 5 pilots across the state, and we are one, is to strengthen and build community networks, to take a deeper dive into our climate vulnerabilities and risks, and develop adaptation strategies to help us address those risks, to strengthen our vulnerable communities and work more closely with our tribal councils, and also to build on previous regional planning efforts like the watershed management plan that you are probably all familiar with from 2015. So that's the kind of the purpose. Next slide, Lauren. And as you all know from attending many meetings over the period of time that we've been working on this, and it's been pretty intense for the last, I'd say, 8 months or so. And you probably know that we created a technical advisory group that many of you serve on. And so we wanted just to share a recap of where we've been with our engagement. We've had a number of Watershed Council meetings. We've tried to keep those on the regular schedule of every other month. And we've had a presentation about WRP at each of those meetings, and a couple of times sort of co-opted the whole meeting to do something specific to this project. So at our council meetings, we presented key milestones, and then we did have a workshop specific to our connections, our network connections with our consulting team from Cal State University and Loyola Marymount, where we learned the results of our survey and the mapping of network connections. That was in December. We've had, I believe, 8 advisory group meetings and a series of office hours for folks to dive deeper into the climate hazard metrics, looking at our water budget, the historical water budget, quantitative and qualitative vulnerability assessments, and implementation strategies and roadmaps. So we've been very busy in the advisory group, and thank you, Mike Antos, for facilitating those meetings. We also had throughout the process 3 forums. Probably most of you attended at least one of those. The 2 of them were in person, or maybe it was 3 of them were in person at Camp Arnez in Oakview, which was an amazing facility for our gatherings and the hard work we did around developing our vision, our adaptation strategies, and tribal resilience and implementation roadmaps. So those forums were really key, and that they were community-based forums, so we did draw some people from outside of our normal network. Then we conducted, or early on actually, at the very beginning, Laura and I and Jamie conducted some partner interviews. We met mostly one-on-one or just a couple of entities at a time to share, or for you to share with us, what were your key concerns about climate, and what kinds of areas of interest do you have that related to this project? And those interviews were really important as we moved forward with implementation of this project. So thank you to our key partners for their involvement. We did survey CAUSE, our local community-based organization who works with underserved communities, conducted survey and focus group meetings that was in November, and we got great feedback from our communities that are frontline communities and vulnerable to some of the climate. Much more involved with working with the Barbareño Ventureño Band of Mission Indians during this process, and they actually hosted our final in-person forum.
I'm sorry, Lynn. I'm trying to click the back button and it's only clicking forward.
Okay. Is this the slide after the one I was just on?
Let me just let me go out of the slide and go to the right side for you. Okay, are you done with the recap on engagement, or would you like me to go back to that slide?
No, well, I did want to just point out the graphic that was on the right side of that slide,
Okay,
which
I'll reshare that one for you.
It's impossible to read, but you'll see it on the screen, but you'll see it in the Watershed Resilience Plan if you haven't already opened up that section on engagement, that chapter 2. So it's just a way of highlighting everything that we've been able to do in terms of engagement so far. But you don't need to be on that slide for very long.
Okay. We are back up and running.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. So yeah, you can move on to the next slide. There we go. So this is also some information we've shared with you in the past, but just as a reminder, these are the things that are essentially required by the state, but also important things for us to be including in our plan, which you will see when you review the plan. It's intended to be a holistic plan about sustainably managing the resources within the watershed, especially in the face of climate change impacts that we're seeing. So key things were identifying climate change vulnerabilities, developing adaptation strategies and projects, integrating and prioritizing equity and inclusiveness in the process, enhancing partnerships across the watershed, and then improving regional competitiveness for funding. That's really a critical one, and I believe we've been able to accomplish that as we move into the implementation phase. Okay, next slide. And then this is my last slide, and then I'll turn it over to Laura. There are some things in this plan that are new from what we've had in previous plans. For example, the Watershed Management Plan, which many of you were involved in creating. We also have the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan that has a section for the Ventura River Watershed And the climate-informed vulnerability assessment is definitely new, even though we did address climate change in the IRWM plan. We took a much deeper dive thanks to the help of our consultants, Eagle Rock Analytics, working with Rincon Consulting. We have now integrated watershed scale strategies that go deeper and broader than what we had in the watershed management plan or the IRWM plan. We have much more directed frontline community input, which is now incorporated into the plan, into the projects. We have much more tribal perspective and cultural resources descriptions in the plan, and I hope you'll enjoy seeing that. That's definitely additional to what we've had in the past or new. A more network-based implementation approach where we'll see multi-benefit projects being implemented across multiple entities. We should be able to accomplish more of that thanks to the work of the plan. And then identifying our priority actions and pathways. There are many, many strategies and projects suggested or action items suggested in the plan, but we did identify the ones that our analysis, our climate and qualitative and quantitative vulnerability assessments pointed to were the highest priority. So that's what you'll see that's different in this plan. So now I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and she'll cover the next element.
You. Oh, I think, nope. Okay. Well, can you go forward a slide actually, Lauren? I think, and then we'll go back to that one. Would you mind? Okay, so I think this is a little helpful just to, as Lynn was talking about what's new in the plan, just an organization. There's 7 chapters in the plan that it moved from watershed network and state of the watershed through and then the climate conditions, vulnerabilities, adaptation strategies, and resilience indicators. So together, the chapters have both the technical foundation and also a framework for action. So that's what you're going to find. And then there's also the appendix, which is also very long. You'll find additional information on methodology, kind of more detailed information as well there, and some specific sections in the appendix too, as well as such as a historical water budget and more information there. So don't forget to look at the appendix, or at least at the list of the appendices, and see which ones you would like to review during your review period. And then can you go back one slide to the adaptation strategies? Oh, it's white on my screen. I'm sorry, Lauren, I made this difficult. I thought I had moved them, but it didn't show up in the version here. I apologize, making it hard for you. More complicated. So anyway, to make the plan actionable, the strategies, they're organized around 8 adaptation goals. The goals really translate the vulnerability assessment into some coordinated areas of action across ecosystems, water systems, communities, some governance, actions, specifically tribal stewardship. And we're introducing the structure here. And I believe Anna might talk more about how the specific strategies and actions were developed. And kind of we can talk more about that. I think we have a slide with the specific 8 on there as well, but they're organized around these 8 goals. And then next slide. So beyond the technical analysis and the strategies and actions in the plan, it also includes program recommendations. There's some of this you'll find in the executive summary as well, that we believe are needed to carry the work forward. So these recommendations focus on how to move from the planning to the coordinated implementation. There's also, for some of those implementation strategies and actions, some more detailed roadmaps and pathways to implementing them. At the core of the program recommendations is really strengthening the Watershed Council's role as the central forum for coordination and expanding the network, aligning funding, establishing clear process for tracking our progress, and adapting over time, and treating the plan as a kind of living resource, living document. So these are some of the kind of core recommendations for more programmatic recommendations. And then from there, I think I'm going to hand it over to Anna from Rincon, who's one of our technical leads, to talk a little more about the technical work that went into the plan. And I don't know if there's we wanted to pause for any questions about like background or anything on the plan now.
Let's pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions?
Maybe go back to the previous slide to see if there's any questions on the previous slide, because I'll talk through this one in a second.
Let's see.
It's like the back.
have
It's a bit difficult.
Back way, wrong way.
I have a quick observation, if it's okay now to do that. It looks like we have several members from our funder entity, DWR, on the call. And Anne Marie and Ashley are both on the call today. I'm not sure if anybody else is. Anne Marie Orr and Ashley Gilraith. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? And we welcome you to this meeting today. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, sure. Oh, Bree, do you want to go first? Oh, sure. I'm Anne Marie Orr. I'm a member of the Financial Assistance Branch at the Department of Water Resources, and I am the program manager over our drought funding programs, our disadvantaged community and tribal involvement program, and I'm going to be the project manager for our upcoming Prop 4 Watershed Resilience program. And I am super excited to be here and hearing all this good work you guys have done. I was particularly paying attention to this slide as we think about and plan for our Prop 4 solicitation. And Ashley?
Yeah, so I'm Ashley Gilreath. I also work in the financial assistance branch. Anne-Marie is my boss. And I was the assistant program manager for the pilots, and now I've also been assigned to work on the future Prop 4 Watershed Resilience program. So it's been, we're getting to a good point, seeing all the pilots finishing work and getting to read all your guys' different plans, and now look at a whole new slug of money coming down.
Great. Thank you both for joining and for introducing yourselves.
And yeah, thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments. And just before moving on off of the slide, moving forward, I just wanted to point out also, I should have mentioned that this graphic you're seeing here, for those that are not familiar with it, haven't seen it yet before, this is a map of our network in the Ventura River Watershed. This was put together by the CSU team, which Ben is here, I believe representing. Forgive me if there was someone else also from that team here that I didn't catch. But that's right there is our map of our network. And so that's also in the plan. There's a link to this as a dynamic resource that you can click and zoom in, zoom out, and look at the different connections between the organizations and partners in the watershed. And that's part of the network assessment chapter as well, the network engagement chapter, one of the earlier chapters. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anna.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Thank you, Lauren, for managing these slides.
Yeah. Should I stay here?
No, you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so like Laura teed me up so nicely there, saying I'm going to walk through a little bit of the more kind of technical analysis of what we did in order to produce these findings and recommendations that are within the Ventura River Watershed Resilience Plan. So some of you are on our advisory group, and so this graphic is going to look very familiar because we talked through this graphic in our last advisory group meeting. Can be a lot to kind of digest if you're new to the project or you're new to this infographic. So I'll try to go through as easily as possible so folks can follow. I will give the caveat, the warning that I'm going to be very much simplifying a very intensive and rigorous process that our entire project team and our engaged parties, our advisory group, all of our partners that we were in collaboration with, all of us that we went through. So I'll be simplifying it quite a bit. There's a lot more detail behind all of this, as I'm sure you can imagine. And if you have any questions about any of the details, I'll pause for questions at the end of this, and we're also too more than happy to talk through any more specific questions you might have afterwards if you'd like. So starting off on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the first start of the arrow or the flow graphic begins with us establishing our assets and resources in the watershed. So we did this in one of our first public forums, as well as in some of the initial conversations that our project team led at the very beginning, at the offset of this project, to help us understand exactly what are the assets and resources that are of concern here in this watershed. What are the things that are critical to our watershed, to our water resource systems, in order for the Ventura River watershed to be able to continue to operate in the way that we all need and want it to. So we took that list then of assets and resources and use those assets and resources to conduct what we called a couple of different vulnerability assessments. Now, we did two kind of distinct vulnerability assessments throughout the course of this project. One was a more qualitative vulnerability assessment, and one was a more quantitative vulnerability assessment, both of which were assessing the different assets and resources that we'd established in the watershed, looking at how we anticipate climate change to impact the watershed. That was some of the work that Lynn and Lara were talking about with our partners at Eagle Rock Analytics, doing these projections of what climate impacts will look like here, understanding how those climate impacts might affect these assets and resources, and then assigning different scores that resulted in final vulnerability scores for all of the different assets and resources that we have in the watershed against all of the different climate hazards that were of concern. Again, talk about simplifying a very rigorous process, but the result of this is we were able to identify the highly vulnerable water resource system assets and features in the watershed that were vulnerable to the climate hazards that we are currently seeing today and we're anticipating to see worsen in the future. We took those results from the vulnerability assessments to understand and kind of sum up what the key vulnerabilities are for the watershed. And with those key vulnerabilities, we then started drafting adaptation strategies and actions that could then help react and respond to these key vulnerabilities. In essence, these are the recommendations, the steps that are being put forward that our watershed partners in our watershed conduct and implement in order to address the key vulnerabilities that were identified. We went through another kind of funneling exercise, if you will, where we developed, in partnership with the advisory group, a screening and prioritization criteria that helped us widow this very initially long list of strategies and actions down to what is still a pretty long list, but a less long list of our key strategies and actions to protect against these key vulnerabilities. Those are the strategies and actions that you can see now in the VRWRP that's posted online in Chapter 6. We have outlined the strategies, which are at the higher level, and then the associated more specific actions underneath each strategy. And all of the strategies and actions are housed underneath those 8 goals that Lynn and Lara were talking about earlier in the presentation. We then, as kind of like a final step in the kind of technical workflow, took those key strategies and actions through our final public forum that we hosted in partnership with VVBMI. We identified with members of our community which of these actions we wanted to develop implementation roadmaps around. And we developed these more detailed implementation plans that can act as more of a step-by-step guide for you all in implementation in the coming months and years in implementing 8 different of the adaptation actions that were developed in this plan. We chose 8 because we wanted to identify one action, develop one implementation roadmap per goal. So you'll notice there's, as we've talked about, 8 different goals. There's one roadmap per goal. We also too then, as a final step, developed the final chapter in the VRWRP, the Resilience Indicators chapter, which is definitely looking forward towards implementation. And what we did was we developed these different kind of high-level indicators that can be used to track watershed resilience. I'll take a second to specify within our adaptation strategies and actions that we have detailed in Chapter 6, we do have metrics to track implementation. And these are specific metrics that are things like, acres treated, number of meetings conducted, number of people reached for outreach campaigns, that sort of thing, that track directly back to the actions that we've identified being implemented. The final chapter, these resilience indicators, are similar in that they're metrics that can track progress, but the progress that we're trying to track, again, at that higher level is resilience of the watershed overall, and essentially tracking our progress towards achieving the higher level goals that we've established. And so these resilience indicators are really intended to be used in implementation, as ideally on an annual basis, the project team is assessing how implementation is going with the WRP, and is it having the intended effect that it wanted to have on the watershed, right? Are we working our way towards the resilience, the more resilient state that we're trying to work towards? The other thing that I'll say lastly about these resilience indicators is that we did our best to align these indicators with DWR's indicators that they've developed through their Resilience Hub effort. And so we're trying to have these indicators be not only personalized and customized specifically to the Ventura River watershed, understanding the unique characteristics of the watershed itself, but also trying best to develop indicators that also align with state efforts so that we can make tracking and monitoring as streamlined as possible with other efforts that are going on across the state. So that was an overflow of our technical work. I'll also call out that at the very bottom of the screen, you see these 3 circles where we also completed a network assessment and conducted focused engagement with overburdened communities. These were outreach and engagement efforts that were critical to our technical workflow and fed into our technical workflow at many different stages, and helped inform really and right set to make sure that the key vulnerabilities we were identifying were grounded in the lived realities of the community, and especially amplifying the voices of those most overburdened and typically historically most vulnerable to the vulnerabilities that we're talking about. We also, too, the last bullet or last bubble there in the bottom right, completed a historic water budget, which is also in the VRWRP. You can see that in the document itself, and the historic water budget also helped right set the vulnerabilities and the vulnerability assessment that we connected so that we could understand exactly where water was flowing in and out in the watershed. Okay, I'll pause there. I know I got into the weeds quite a bit. Are there any questions anybody wants to ask on the overview of our technical workflow?
People are welcome to just drop off of mute and ask. You can raise a hand, you can put it in chat. We can take it any different way. I think maybe your clarity, Anna, is leading us to have no questions.
I'll take that, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, before clicking onto the next slide, Lauren, I'll give a caveat. The next slide that you'll see is not intended to be fully digested in terms of all of the content that's on it. I know there's already a lot of content on this slide, but that what we're aiming to demonstrate, to illustrate on the next slide is kind of an overlay of the summary that Lynn and Lara gave of the outreach and engagement efforts that were conducted with our technical workflow. And we just wanted to show you all that there were a lot of engagement efforts that were happening throughout the course of this project. And we had multiple points of input, multiple points of engagement that fed into every single key decision and every single key milestone and deliverable within this workflow. And so hopefully when you all are reading this VRWRP, you can understand it wasn't just this like project team that's presenting to you now that was informing what this this WRP looks like. It was very much crafted and shaped and defined by the really incredible in-depth input that we collected from all of you all on this call, as well as many others who are not. So Lauren, if you want to hit next, you'll see a bunch of red circles and arrows showing kind of the key points of input that we collected, specific targeted feedback and reviews relative to all of these key stages in our technical work. And again, as was summarized by Laura, there is a lot more detail in the actual WRP itself in terms of all of the different engagement efforts and opportunities that the team conducted throughout the course of the project. So there's a lot more detail within the WRP itself.
And the only thing I'd add too is that this is the slide where the power of the network intersects with the power of the technical work and the output of the plan. This is very much the network's plan, and this is the slide in all of its chaos, perhaps, that reveals that truth. And so as part of the technical team, and my responsibility is mostly supporting that network, understanding itself and contributing. And so I really like this slide, even though to Anna's point, it's a lot going on in here.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so that's the end of, I think, my section. Lauren, if you want to hit next slide, I think I am handing it. Oh, I'm sorry, I take it back. I still have the slide. Okay, my last kind of report out to this group is summarizing these key findings, the key strategies, and looking forward to implementation. So what you can probably see but not read on the right-hand side of the screen is, if my memory is serving me correctly, figure 43 of the VRWRP. This is within your chapter 6, which provides the overview of all of the goals, strategies, and actions that were developed that are essentially, again, the recommendations that we're putting forward for the watershed to implement in order to help bring it back to its more resilient state. The infographic that we're, again, seeing but not totally reading summarizes the goals and the strategies. As I mentioned, there's more specific actions housed underneath every single strategy. And so what you can do is you can scroll through the WRP itself. They're organized by goals and then by strategies to find the more specific actions within it. You can see here that the 8 different goals are focused kind of or spread the gambit of water systems that we're focusing on. So we've got goals that are anchored around ecosystem health and understanding the importance of our watershed with regards to supporting the really critical habitats and ecosystems that are within the watershed. We've got goals around water supply, ensuring that we have we continue to have adequate water supply to sustain the watershed. As we all know, this watershed is unique in that it relies wholly on internal water sources, and there's no external source of water supply that comes into the watershed, which is obviously very unique, especially for the Southern California region. And so wanting to ensure that we continue that sustainable water supply management into the future with these changing climate conditions that we're anticipating to continue to see. We have a couple of different goals that are focused around our infrastructure, in particular, making sure our infrastructure as well as communities are made resilient to the worsening effects of flooding, extreme precipitation, as well as sea level rise, storm surge, and coastal changes and coastal impacts that we'll see. As most of you probably are very well aware of, the watershed has a unique shape in that there's a very small chunk of it that is actually coastal. However, there's a lot of assets and resources that are in that region that are definitely susceptible and vulnerable to sea level rise. So that's all embedded. I believe it's in goal 4. And then we have a goal that's anchored around our recreation sector and ensuring that our recreational access and assets themselves are managed and made accessible to community members who rely on them within the watershed, and especially to protect and promote that connection to the watershed that we have that runs deep in a lot of folks' cultural identities and personal ties to the lands. We've got a goal around agricultural practices and making sure that we're protecting our ag community in the face of climate change, both from the perspective of wanting to make sure that the ag community itself is ready and resilient to climate change and ensuring that the ag lands were minimizing the impact on the watershed itself, which we know this Ventura River Watershed is already doing a lot of incredible work on working with ag communities to minimize negative impact on water systems. Goal 7 is our kind of coordination, governance, funding goal that spans a pretty broad spectrum, but is focused on how do we improve the kind of social systems and partnerships that we have in this watershed to promote all of what we've talked about already in terms of like types of projects and types of efforts that we want to implement, but making sure that we're partnering, that we've got a good governance system, that we've got funding secured in order to make sure that the work that we're pushing forward is as effective as possible. And then last, but obviously most definitely not least, we have our goal 8, which is around Native leadership and Indigenous knowledge, which was co-developed with some of our tribal partners. So we've got strategies and actions in there that embody the priorities and key concerns of some of our tribal partners in this project, and understanding how we can align the efforts from our previous goals while centering and elevating tribal leadership and tribal voices in these efforts, knowing that and understanding that they have a lot of knowledge, incredible knowledge around how to sustainably manage resources and implement land management in a way to promote resiliency. So that's a high-level overview of our goals. Again, there's a lot more detail in Chapter 6, so I encourage you all to dive deeper into that to read more around the specific actions that we're promoting underneath those different goals. I see a hand.
Yeah, Anna, why don't you, before we go to the hand, you show the rest of what's going to be on this slide in here in a second, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, that sounds good. Leslie, if you don't mind holding, I'm almost done with the rest of what's on here. So like I mentioned, we have these 8 different goals, and then within every single goal, there is one implementation roadmap that was developed. We, like I said, decided and defined which roadmaps, for the most part, to detail out based off of feedback that we collected in the last forum. We also collected a lot of really critical input on what these roadmaps will look like during that forum. And so when you open up the Chapter 6, you'll see you have these multi-page spreads that have just additional detail on what it will take, who it will take, what resources it will take to implement the select handful of actions that were selected to go into more detail on. I want to emphasize that all of the different actions are critical in their own way. This was by no means the 8 most important actions, but rather what we encouraged folks to focus in on in terms of like the voting exercise during the final forum to select which actions would get roadmaps developed for. The actions we tried to select were the ones that were perhaps more complex, involved multiple partners, that would benefit from having this additional kind of detailed roadmap in the WRP in implementation. I just wanted to say, by no means are we saying that these are the only ones that should be implemented or the ones that should only be focused on initially. All of the actions within the plan itself are important in their own ways, but these ones we're hoping will just help kind of jumpstart some implementation for the more complex ones that have more partnership and collaboration required for implementation. And then one more click, Lauren. And then again, as I mentioned, looking into implementation and tracking our success and our progress, we have our resilience indicators in Chapter 7 that are organized by or categorized by the different goals that we have here so that we can understand how we can track our progress as we're making our way towards the goals that we have outlined ourselves. I also too want to call out, we had a really interesting well-stated comment from one of our advisory group members, and I'm going to butcher, and apologies for not saying it as eloquently as they did. But something too I'll emphasize is that the watershed itself already is very resilient, right? The Ventura River Watershed is a beautiful place, as I know I'm preaching to the choir right now. And there is a lot of resilience already embedded in the watershed. And what we're trying to do is work our way back towards some of the more natural resilience that was embedded within the watershed prior to a lot of historic mismanagement that has happened, not just in this watershed, but across the developed United States. And what we're trying to do here is to figure out how can we find this balance between the development that we do have and the resilience that we're trying to achieve. So these resilience indicators hopefully help you all in your implementation in this next stage that you're heading into with this WRP, and making sure that we're heading towards the direction that we want to be heading in and making our watershed more resilient in the face of a changing climate. Okay, that was what I had on this slide. So
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for your patience, Leslie. You want to come in and ask your question or share?
And I admit I have not looked at the plan at all. So I'm just wondering, it crossed my mind, how does the removal of the Casitas Dam, how will that affect this? Do we know?
By chance, Leslie, are you thinking of the Matilaha Dam?
I'm sorry, but why did I say that? Yes, yeah, I'm thinking of Matilaha Dam, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And you are not the first person to ask this question in this project. It's been a common topic of discussion. It is, as you open up the plan, you could even do a search for MDRP or Matilaha. It does come up a few different times. And we do discuss the Matilaha Dam removal project as a ecosystem restoration removal project as a key resilience project that is underway in the watershed. We try to spotlight it as the kind of resilience effort that it is in the watershed. And we do have, as you'll see when you read through some of our strategies and actions, some alignment efforts to help promote and help push that effort forward as best as we can. We did loop in a number of the key players in MDRP as well as the agencies that are leading it in partnership throughout this effort. So we did our best to align it and to try to center it and highlight it as best as we could as the resilience effort it is. So Leslie, the short answer to your question is yes, it's mentioned in the plan. You'll see it highlighted in a few different places.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Awesome. Okay. I think, yes, I knew it. Knew this was the next slide. Obviously, this is a huge effort, and it was, it's been under a very tight timeline of, I think, about 18 months, maybe a little less, since that might be the whole scope of our timeline, but truly it has been such a multi-layered effort. And as the RCD is the lead agency, we just wanted to give a moment to share our acknowledgements and offer the room up to any reflections. But this is a list of our advisory group, I believe, and I would love to pass it along to Jamie and to Lynn and Lara if you'd like to add anything specific about this.
Thanks, Lauren. I don't know that I want to add anything specific to this slide, other than a general acknowledgement of all of the individuals who have engaged in conversation with us about this effort, lent us their expertise in specific issues or priorities, or current projects or programs that align with sort of I don't want to call them constraints, but the very focused outcomes that came about from this planning effort. So I want to make that general statement, and then I'll circle back to that. But I do want to take a moment to speak to the acknowledgements. And I'm going to take this moment to call out several people, but I want to start with acknowledgement of Lynn Rodriguez, because Lynn has just been a tireless advocate for the Watershed Council and for the Ventura River Watershed. Time immortal. I mean, so I just want to make sure that I take a moment to acknowledge that. And there's other members of the team I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge. So that one of them would be Lara, because I mean, honestly, having this opportunity to work with Laura, I'd never realized sort of how in depth that Laura could get with respect to, analysis and assessments of work products. And so that has just been an enormous lift for our team. She's really done a lot of, I'll call it QA/QC on it. Just tireless effort with respect to that. And then talking about tireless energy, I just want to make a shout out to Anna and the Recon lead, just tireless energy in getting this process moving forward, always being there, being patient with all the feedback from not just the team, but also from all of our AG members and just anybody who wanted to submit anything for consideration. She's been there and really thought about those questions, about those evaluations, and about the response. So just been an incredible person to work with. Another individual I wanna speak a word about is Vivon. Vivon, I think you're on here. And what I want to say about Vivon is I really admire her courage in stepping up as being our chair without really knowing what this would look like. So she put herself on the line to lead this effort. And it was just like, I don't really know what this is or what it's going to end up being, but I think this is great for the watershed and I support it. And so thank you, Vivon, for that. Part of our team, Lauren, I want to also send a shout out because Lauren's taken lead on tribal engagement, and that has been, talk about a multi-layer effort. So thank you, Lauren, for helping us get to a better space with respect to our tribal engagement and those relationships. And I certainly want to also acknowledge the Department of Water Resources, and not just because of the funder, and not just because there's two members of DWR here present, but I want to acknowledge that DWR and their team has been with us every step of the way. If we had any questions, if we needed any assistance, they were always there for us, and they were there with actual direction, and they were there in a very timely way. So thank you so much to the entirety of the team, and then circling back to all of the members of the council, and also just AG, the leadership committee, and just those members of the public who have engaged with us in this process. I appreciate all the conversations we've had because, everybody brings with them sort of their individual perspectives, whether it's personal or professional. And we appreciate the conversations that we've had trying to, as a team, work in those perspectives that might be somewhat localized, and helping us craft them so that they're applicable region-wide, because that's one of the things, and also applicable directly to the water sectors, because that's what this plan is really focused on. And so I appreciate the conversations and the patience in helping us craft language that incorporates your perspectives in a sort of watershed-wide document. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking so other people have space to speak. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Jamie. Those were such nice acknowledgements. Lynn, you wanted to say something? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Jamie. You did a fantastic job of recognizing everybody and their contributions. Agree with what all of the things you said. I want to thank you as the executive director of the RCD. I recall when this was an opportunity for us that DWR presented, and knowing how much you have on your plate and how difficult and challenging it might be for you to play this lead role as the grantee, you stepped up and agreed to do it. And I really believe the RCD, at least in this watershed, is the perfect entity to take this on, since you are so deeply embedded in the work in the watershed. You're going to be part of implementation of many of the strategies and actions that we have. So I think it was a perfect fit. The other pilots are managed by water agencies, and I think having the RCD manage this one, really elevates the potential for success going forward, since you're already also managing and coordinating, thanks to Lauren and the rest of the RCD team that are involved in the council. So Thank you, Jamie, for your leadership and your strong guidance throughout this process. We could not have been successful without your knowledge and your involvement. And then I also wanted just to shout out to Mike Antos, who was, on the team with Stantec, helping to manage our meetings, and you'll hear from him in a few minutes. But he's lent a really important perspective from all the work he's done in the past. Mike and I have worked together for a long time, and I just wanted to thank him for his continued involvement and leadership on running a meeting effectively. I think that's a really important skill set, and we appreciate it. And also, thank you to Laura. I just want to echo what Jamie said about the level of detail. She was able to really zero in on some really important things that the rest of us might not have caught. And it's been great to work with you, Laura, as co-project manager. So, and everybody else on the team, everything else that Jamie said, but I just wanted to get those in. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I've said this before, but I jumped into this like halfway through, and a handful of partners also, adjusted to the tight timeline of this project. And so, like, in reflection and like looking up to all of you, Lynn and Laura, you have done such hard work, and I really appreciate all the meetings we've had and support you've given me and in like, me kind of stepping into this a little bit later than anticipated. And I agree, Jamie, being our executive director at the RCD and dealing with so much change, it's been a really great and challenging year, but I deeply appreciate it. So thank you guys for those reflections. I don't want to lose sight of our advisory group either. Yeah, we just really greatly appreciate the expertise people have lent. So thank you so much. The next slide is the like more specific consultants for our WRP team. And yeah, I'm really excited to have everyone be able to review the plan and for you all to see the contributions tied up into this document. And I'm excited to see how we reference this document into the future. I do believe that the next slide is about review. So I just wanted to pause again to offer up a space for any advisory group reflections, or, Vivon, if you have anything you'd like to say as a chair, I think this is a good time to pause and open up that space.
Yeah, sure. I'll hop in and say just thank you so much to everyone who was involved throughout this entire process. I think there was a lot of engagement, and I think it really speaks to the long-standing connections and strengths of, everyone in this community through the Watershed Council, right? I think that was a part of what made us such an attractive applicant to this pilot initiative for watershed resilience plans. And I think the continued dedication of everyone involved, I think, has just been really inspiring to see, and really demonstrates how everyone in this community can really work together. And of course, big shout out to you all at the RCD for leading this charge. And sorry, my dog is barking. Leading this charge and keeping us moving forward. And for Lynn and Lara and the whole consultant team, it's just been really great. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Feel free to unmute yourselves. Any reflection welcome. Okay. Well, I'll go into the nitty-gritty aspects of reviewing the plan. So like we said at the beginning of the meeting, the plan is now available for review on the RCD website. And I will open up the website for us to look at, but I just want everyone to know it's a very tight turnaround. I feel like that's a theme of this project. But the review closes April 1st, and that is partially due to our consultants being available to help integrate comments. And like review comments, integrate them. And then anything after that time period, um, we do want this document to be, evolving and living, but it will be, much more challenging to kind of meaningfully integrate reflection and comments. And that will be ultimately up to um, the Watershed Council, the RCD team, to, revisit this document and address changes after this time period. So this is the best time to review the document. So for any partner that's not on here that you think should have an important review period, like send them this information and share with them that this is going to kind of close April 1st. And we do want to mention that I believe next week the graphical edits to the document will be posted. And so if you see any format changes, um, just anticipate format changes basically. And yeah,
And
from there, I'd like to go to the website. So this is our project website that has been the project website this entire time. It's on the VCRCD webpage under water and let's see, it's under climate resilience. Yeah, Ventura River Watershed Climate Resilience. And right here, you can see that the plan is now available for council review. This is a hyperlink to the plan, and it's huge, but it's separated, into the table of contents and 8 different chapters. And then we have a separate link for the appendices. All of these are in PDF format. And oops.
And Lauren, I'll just add that with the graphical changes that are going to happen, the executive summary will look a little different. I believe it's part of that. And some of the, like Anna was saying, has told us the graphics, some of them will be updated. We'll just be replacing the version that's on here. So kind of, if you were looking for those or you'd like to see that, just check back and it'll be the replaced version.
Awesome, thank you. So that's where you can access the plan and the appendices, and then right below it, you can submit your comments using this online form. And it is split into a long form paragraph answer, and you can add your comments, including the page number, the figure numbers, any specific language that needs amending, and it's split into the executive summary, and then it's split by chapter and appendices. So please use this form. Please review the plan. And if you visit the Ventura Watershed Council website, the plan is not available at this time. I don't think we have a plan to upload the PDF document to the Watershed Council website, but the Watershed Council website will have a link that can redirect you to this webpage. So that's just a little thing I'd like to note. Yeah, is there any questions about this?
I don't have any questions, Lauren, but I did want to just maybe make a note of a few things. To your point about it not being on the Watershed Council website, the reason for that was so that there wouldn't be forms scattered across different web pages. So we just wanted to consolidate it into one location just for ease and simplicity for sharing purposes and also for getting comments. And then I do want to make mention that as you're reading through and reviewing the content in the plan itself, please note that it's relatively large, and so technical details are constrained for the most part to the appendices, and that's the value of the appendices. If you want to know how things were done or want to get more technical detail about interpretations or statements, the appendices might be the place where you're going to find that information. So it is a very valuable component of the overall plan, especially it relates to the context behind the content in the plan itself.
Great. Yeah, Lynn.
Thank you, Jamie. I also just wanted to add that the state's guidelines for us was to create a very accessible plan that would be understandable to a broad audience and would be succinct enough that people could really follow it, which is the reason why we have so much technical information in the appendix. And also they would have liked to have seen us stick to a smaller page limit than the one that we ended up with. But we really felt that everything we included in the document itself, as opposed to the appendices, was important. And we could have maybe trimmed it in some places, but basically what you see is a lot of really important information and hopefully is accessible and understandable to everyone that reads it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm excited for this review period. I think it's best now. We obviously have a lot of next steps for the WRP, and I think the hands of the next steps are naturally, within the Watershed Council. I think that, Jamie, would you want to touch on this? And then maybe we can bring in Mike to guide some conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I kind of threw these words on here as I was considering next steps from kind of two perspectives. So as lead agency, and this has been alluded to previously, as lead agency, there's ample opportunity for us to take leadership or to support or to be partner on, any of the goals that are listed in the plan itself. From ecosystem, water quality, ag, tribal support. These are all goals that we can, as lead agency, work towards and support. But then there's also goal 7, which is coordination of the Watershed Council, which of course we're the watershed currently, anyways, the watershed coordinator. But we're also want to strengthen and coordinate the network itself, which is sort of that larger embodiment of the council. Not everybody can always participate at council meetings, and not everyone's going to participate in the leadership committee, but everybody has a vested interest in a stronger watershed network and a stronger forum for watershed networking, which would be the Watershed Council. So there are a number of ways that we, as watershed coordinator and as lead agency, separate from that, are looking at the WRP and planning out our next steps. So this is just sort of things that have already been mentioned that are priorities and had been priorities for the watershed even before the WRP itself took form. But one of the things we definitely want to do is build on the knowledge and the communication that came about in discussing the size and the composition and the connections of the Watershed Resilience Network. So we're going to work towards coordinating that. We'll also, of course, view the Watershed Council as the preeminent forum for having these conversations, providing the venue for us to have coordinated actions and discussing forward-thinking, proactive strategies and actions that align with the plan and other plans that are going to come about. One of the things that we want to be cognizant of is that however the WRP takes shape, however we go about implementing priorities and implementation pathways or identifying new pathways, it needs to be sort of integrated under council governance so that there's structure to it, so that there's a mechanism for us to communicate, a mechanism for us to share. One of the other things that I think we need to work on, and we will be working on, is building coalitions. So this is identifying where we have leaders, identifying where we have partners, identifying any gaps, and also just expanding the network, expanding the coalitions, and being inclusive in doing so. But it's not just leaders and partners that have to be identified and have to be addressed. We also have to build systems that support these coalitions. So we need support systems. We need mechanisms put in place for support letters or for sharing of information or data. And we need to have systems built in place that allow for that coordination of all these strategies and cross-cutting programs or projects that further the goals of everyone in the network and in the council. And we're going to talk about this a little bit, but one of the things that's really critical in thinking about how to do all this is we need to leverage funding. And it's not just leveraging funding for implementation, it's leveraging funding for the support systems that we need in place, leveraging funding so that we can continue to support the coordinator positions and the network positions. And then perhaps most importantly, because we do want to continually look to the future, we all get siloed so easily by pursuing individual projects and just getting to those deliverables and meeting our requirements under our grants. And one of the things that is really important, I think, is to have space where the network coordinator, the watershed coordinator, can actually help track progress, help coordinate discussion of progress within the Watershed Council, within that forum, and find gaps, identify additional needs so that we can place ourselves, position ourselves to go after those very quickly and not lose momentum. And then, of course, communicate outcomes, again, to the larger community so everybody knows where everybody is, again, to further coordination proactively to address upcoming needs. And then that all just goes right back to the top, where it's with just strengthening coordination across the network and strengthening the ability of the Watershed Council to serve as that hub of information sharing. So I've spent a lot of time on this slide. I apologize for that. It's all stuff that we've already talked about, but I just want to take a few more moments to reiterate how important this is, and one of the reasons why I felt it was not an opportunity that we should let slip through our fingers. We needed to pursue conclusion of a WRP that was expansive in its scope in addressing the larger watershed needs. So thank you.
Thank you. I do think that, our next steps for the RCD is, working with Mike, kind of reviewing the materials that we have already within the Watershed Council, reviewing the Watershed Resilience Plan, and I think just internally our next step to kind of push forward this slide is kind of tying up as many loose ends as we can to support a transition outside of this grant period. And sorry, the team's icon got me distracted. What would Lynn, do you want to go? Oh, now you're still
muted, Lynn.
muted. You're still muted.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to call out really quickly, the image on this slide is a picture of some of the leadership from the Barbareño Ventureño Band Mission Indians who have become more closely aligned with working with the RCD in a kind of government to government capacity. And I think this is one of the top achievements of this effort, is that we are much more deeply engaged in the watershed with the tribal council and some other tribal community members. And they as I mentioned, or one of us mentioned, the BVBMI actually opened our final forum. So as you know, moving forward and building coalitions, I think something for everybody to be really aware of if they weren't already, and you will see it in the plan. There are lots of elements of the plan that were actually created by our tribal partners, the Native Coast Action Network folks, contributions of Julie Tuamite Stensley, and also from the BVBMI leadership. So be on the lookout for the many ways that the plan was enhanced by that engagement with them, and that going forward they will play they want to play, and we want them to play a stronger role in the future of the watershed and the resilience of the watershed. So just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Lynn. Our next slides have to do with like very specific, conversations about funding opportunities. So I just wanted to pause and share, like, Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or are there any questions?
Sure. Lauren, I'm watching our agenda to see when you want me to try to draw everyone else in. Warning to everyone who's been enjoying this amazing television program, soon it's going to be time to participate. So I'll be asking for raised hands. I'll be asking for questions. I'm going to invite some of you on to your cameras and your microphones. But is now the moment for that, Lauren?
Yes, yeah.
All right.
Now's the time.
Okay.
Well,
Let's leave this slide for just a second. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was going to say, Mike, like those who thought you were off the hook because we were at the end of the plan, you're not. We still have review, and then we do still have next steps
That's right.
that Mike's going to speak to. So thank you, Mike.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, all right, show of hands, just use your raised hand feature. Who here is a leader?
Mike, I think it might be nice if I stop screen sharing. Is that?
I'm going to leave. I will ask you to do that in a second, but not quite yet.
Thanks.
Show of hands, who in the meeting is a leader? Only 3? I don't believe it. 4, 5? Okay. Nice. Okay. Who, hands down, who in the meeting is a partner? Nice. Okay, now you can stop sharing, Lauren. The point I wanted to make is, of course, the team has been here celebrating the report and study and plan that they helped fashion, but this is the networks plan. This was the plan for the watershed. It built from what the watershed already had. Earlier in the call, the discussion, there was the idea that this is a very resilient watershed. And one of the reasons that is true is that there was already a really strong network here. And when the state thought about doing watershed resilience pilots, one of the things they were really cognizant of is that the portions of the state that have strong regional networks are places that are already more resilient. So networks are themselves a resilience strategy. And the fact that all of you were a really strong network already speaks to both the resilience that the watershed celebrates, and the product of this report is that a lot of the actions that are called forward, as you saw Anna describe, it was, what are our assets? What are our vulnerabilities? What should we do to sustain them or improve them? A vast majority of those actions, somebody's already tackling. And that is a way that this plan will help you celebrate the stuff that you're already doing. Now, of course, it also highlighted a few things that popped out as needing to be done that nobody's tackled yet. And so that becomes a really key spot for this network to draw its attention to. One, you can celebrate what everyone's already doing and show how that's relevant in this context as building resilience. But also you can now together say, okay, we identified this challenge or this opportunity that no one has tackled yet. What's our approach to doing that? The state's recognition that resilience, that regional networks are this source of resilience. They also were communicating that regional networks like yours are really strong for having conversations between regions. And so, of course, this effort was the Ventura, River watershed, but you've got the Santa Clara River watershed, you've got other watersheds in the county of Ventura that have in the past had intersections and overlaps and conversations between them. So these networks are braided together in a way. They're not separate, but they are braided. So those region to region conversations can also be held by networks. And of course, the state really appreciates having a strong regional network at which it can engage because the state's interests are broader, obviously, than just your watershed, but having a regional network at which to engage makes their ability to provide technical financial assistance, their ability to manage their own assets and responsibilities, it makes it easier for the state to engage with a regional network like yours. So these are all baked into this idea of these pilots, both pursuing a plan, but also strengthening, honoring, or building a regional network at that can support that watershed scale thinking. Of course, the other piece which you all already knew, Watershed Council and Watershed Management Plan, deep in your history, that at the watershed scale there are specific benefits to thinking at that hydrologic scale. That bounded system is a useful way to be effective. Okay, so my job is to encourage a little discussion about next steps. And you've already heard a little bit from Jamie. And what's been really interesting is watching the RCD and Jamie too both be the leads on this effort and supporting the facilitation of your network through the watershed coordinators, but also being a member of the network. And so the RCD and Jamie in particular has been trading hats on and off during this effort and even during this meeting and being thoughtful by that the attention that RCD has been able to pay to the network is something that others are encouraged to do as well, is thinking about how being a member of this network is a thing to treat as valuable. You were a strong network, but that strength can sometimes lead to looking past the asset. And so thinking about, reflecting with gratitude and a thoughtfulness about how being part of the network benefits your day jobs and allows you to benefit others is one of the other key pieces. Okay, as I said, there's lots of actions already underway that the plan says are important. And obviously that's an opportunity for people who are doing them to say this thing that I'm doing, that I'm trying to get social, political, or financial support to be successful at, is a thing that the plan is calling for. Obviously that logic is an asset to all of you. The question is, what is this network thinking about doing for the things that are not started? And so I'm wondering, members of the advisory committee who know the plan the best, I wonder if I could call on any of you to share a little bit about how you're thinking this plan will support you doing what you were doing anyway. And we'll come back around and have a question of how anyone is thinking about doing something new because of what the plan shared. And I'm leaning on the advisory committee members because you know it better than the rest, but anyone who's reviewed the plan or has thoughts, please speak. How do you imagine this plan is going to support you doing something you were doing anyway and helping you enhance that effort? Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. For me, I think the thing that frustrates me so much is I feel like there's a need for more monitoring. There's a need for more information about the value of the actions that we're taking. And that may be, that relates across all of the different priorities that all of us have, whether it's water quality or habitat restoration metrics or whatever. So I really feel like one of the things that I want to devote my attention to is how can we support, as was called in the plan, more coordinated monitoring, more coordinated data sharing, so that we all can make informed decisions. We can identify data gaps. Hopefully, working through that will mean that we are communicating and we're gaining trust with one another, because I know data is something that can be turned into a weapon. So, um, so being able to get data that we all can use, identify areas where we need additional information, so that we can just close off the inefficiencies of feeling like we're siloed and we can't information share and we can't work together to get to like common ground about where we need more information and how to do it. So that's something I'm looking forward to working on.
Yeah, that's exciting, Jamie. So that's a little bit of both the things that are already happening, but a new thing too is that there is likely a lot of monitoring going on, but perhaps not as much alignment or sharing. And so maybe there's keep doing what you're doing, look for the spots where more data might be useful, but then also look for ways to share with confidence that the data you have will be understood and used appropriately amongst everyone. Yeah, thanks. Peter, I saw you came off of mute. Do you have something to contribute?
Well, I just think that goal 4, as it relates to just public infrastructure, is critically important, as we have identified the vulnerabilities to a variety of systems that public entities are managing, whether that be wastewater or distribution of potable water or storms, sewers, or the sewer system. I think I might have said that, or the septic system, not something the city manages. But identifying which we have those vulnerabilities, and then identifying as a group or individually, depending upon how those assets are managed, how we can try to fix them. We all have really tight budgets, and our long-term, from a planning perspective for like CIPs, is 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. But if there's fixes that we need more rapidly, we can identify them and maybe based upon this plan, maybe try to address them more quickly. And look for funding as well, to help support the city of Ventura or other agencies or groups that might have some constraints in terms of implementation.
Yeah, Peter, I suspect I'm just going to ask you, but I bet there's peers of yours here. It's no surprise to you that those vulnerabilities existed, right? That we didn't break any new ground from your perspective on identifying vulnerabilities. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, on a high level, like it's a mature watershed with mature stakeholders, and with that, speaking on behalf of the city of Ventura, and there's others on this call from the city of Ventura, I believe, we're aware of a lot of these areas or a lot of the assets, but I think that this plan can highlight them and identify the vulnerabilities so that we can that can support us in moving forward with adaptation. I think that at the council level, at the decision-making level, both in the city, but also looking for funding regionally and from the state, it's just really, I think it's valuable. And,
Yeah,
I
thanks,
appreciate, I
Peter.
see my partner, Sarah here,
Yeah,
who can speak on behalf of the water department.
I'll come to you in a second, Sarah. Just one of the things that I liked about the answer, Peter, and what is true about networks and about this planning effort is that any one member here who has a focused challenge and a focused set of opportunities, by being a network, you have an opportunity to kind of teach others how you see your challenges, how you see your opportunities, and it brings alignment into how people think across the integrated suite of opportunities and challenges that we hold here. And one of the things I often talk about, I coach people to think about when they're saying we and us, to imagine who they think is inside that pronoun, right? And the we of this meeting is this meeting. The we of Peter, you and your colleagues, is perhaps the city, but maybe also the we is the network here. And so thinking about who the we and the us is as you're constructing ideas around who can support which things, who can understand how to prioritize. Sometimes it may be clear to my sets of experiences, my challenges and opportunities actually need to go second. And Peter, yours need to go first. And I wouldn't know that until you taught me them and I taught you mine, and then we can figure it out together. I'll go to you now, Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, I echo what Peter has said just now, and I think we at Ventura Water particularly have interests about the vulnerabilities due to higher flows and impacts to infrastructure, and being able to coordinate that amongst other organizations in the watershed that are facing similar, and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and such. And so we look forward to both the funding aspect and the coordination aspect that this is providing.
Yeah, thanks for that. It is true, and I think I'm talking to people who know this in your bones, but none of the opportunities or challenges that the watershed faces can wholly be segmented apart from all the other challenges and opportunities. It's almost impossible to isolate one of these things and do it by yourself. And I think you all know that, and this plan reveals that. And clearly, the state is coming to recognize that in the way that they've established these pilots, and likely how they'll start rolling out funds from the watershed resilience program that's coming and out into the future as well. Do other people have anything to contribute about how they're thinking about using the plan to reinforce something they're doing already? Go ahead, Regina. Hi, Regina.
Hey, Mike, it's so good to see you here. Whoop,
You
whoop.
too.
I mean, I got to take a peek at it. I wasn't really involved with Watershed Progressive or localizing California waters. And I apologize for that, but I am just, number one, grateful to everyone for the work that you've done. The plan looks great. For the work we're already doing, it really helps us understand how to help build the network. Who is the we? So talking about what Mike's just brought up, like it helps inform how we're a better partner, who should be going first, where do we best fit in this ecosystem, trying to address these impacts and challenges, but also how we're celebrating together too. So it's already just at the first glance, really, I think it's going to be informative for how we show up and can also support others. And I'll just keep it at a high level. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Regina. Other members of the advisory committee that have been watching the process along the way, do you see how this plan is going to help you reinforce something you're already doing? And I used to teach at one of the CSUs, so I'm perfectly comfortable sitting here quietly, putting the pressure of silence on everyone.
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Thanks,
Um,
Yvonne.
yeah, I think one thing that this plan will help OVLC kind of maybe push forward in a way is all of those. It was nice to have, I think it was in goal one, all of our like ecosystem kind of strategies all kind of laid out right there. And I loved how the plan identified potential leads and partners on a lot of those efforts. And I feel like, here in restoration, your work doesn't just stop at parcel boundaries, like nature doesn't care about the arbitrary boundaries that we have set. And so being able to think really strategically about who we can call about doing the projects that we need to be doing, and how, I think Jamie mentioned this earlier as well, but like how we can not only coordinate the work, but also coordinate the monitoring of the outcomes of that work. I think that is one thing, especially for our organization. I think we're so focused on doing the work sometimes that kind of collecting data beyond what we're kind of focused on is something that maybe gets lost a little, or maybe doing additional research to understand the benefits that are coming out of some of the work that we're doing, I think sometimes gets a little bit lost because we're just so focused on getting it done. And so being able to kind of take a step back, think really strategically about what kind of data we want to collect and how we can coordinate that data collection with other members of the watershed, and really make sure that we're contributing to something that, has a greater effect than just the work that we're working on, I think is really important. And also being able to just like call on people, call people like with our rundown removal work, as we make our way downstream, who are the people we should be reaching out to, continue and collaborate with and, coordinate with in terms of our permitting and our work. So that's the big piece that I take away from it.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. I've got a few minutes left in my share of the meeting. I'm curious if there's someone who is thinking about doing something new because of what they learned from the planning process. Who's got a new idea, a new colleague, a new process that you're planning on bringing online because of what you learned through this time together? Go ahead, Jamie.
All right, I'll throw my hat in the ring here. Um, I think one of the things that got people really excited about, and it was completely new to me, was sort of the network mapping and assessment tools, the Kumu. That sort of was gave us the opportunity to evaluate like connections and strengths and gaps. And um, I would like to, I plan on continuing to work towards that and use that as a tool to sort of evaluate where we were, how we evaluated ourselves, and then in the future, like where we stand after all of these actions that we hope to take, all of the opportunities we're going to pursue to strengthen the network. Like, I'm really looking forward to using that tool and then assessing it, past and future, to kind of speak to where we've come, how this plan has been used to kind of expand our ability to work together, communicate more effectively, and achieve more of our shared goals. So that was a new tool. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can leverage that.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, that idea that you need to focus on your relationships and do active work to make them strong isn't something that all of us should sound pretty normal to us from our private lives. It is true here too. And it's between your colleagues and the organizations between one another, being deliberate about the professional relationships that underpin this network is valuable investment of time and energy, because it does bring resilience, it does bring greater success and greater reward. Go ahead, Lynn. You're on mute again. You're not used to muting yourself, are you?
Probably not. Thank you for bringing that up, Jamie. And I just wanted to add to that, that if you haven't already looked at the CSU assessment report, network assessment report, which you've had, access to for a while now, but just wanted to elevate the profiles that are located in that document. Very comprehensive information about each of the folks that responded to the survey that CSU conducted. And that should be a really valuable resource for you, especially those of you that maybe aren't familiar with everybody, all of those folks and those entities. And that might help prompt your thoughts about how you might collaborate in the future. And at some point, I think we need to keep that going or updated it, keep updating it into the future.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, I will give it back to you here in a second, Lauren, for the next part of the agenda. Just one of the things I would say is that, my greatest fulfillment in my career is getting a chance to work with people who are discovering they are ready to strive together towards something. And so that has been very satisfying about the work I've gotten a chance to do alongside all of you as you made this plan together. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was very fulfilling for me, and I look forward to seeing how this plays out for all of you going forward. And I'll give it back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think also like my soft reflection on that is like we're, you know, constantly navigating like the limitations of funding, and I think like participating in this planning program like was really great for us, and it provided like an update of our general watershed management plan. That is something that like we can keep referencing as a watershed, and like a lot of our partners feel like there's, a reestablishment, a reinvigoration of like our network communication and also this updated information in the plan. Um, but yeah, like our watershed being able to participate in the Department of Water Resources programs, I think is a really great takeaway. And that kind of leads us into, we have two more slides on updates about Prop 4. And I do want to just share that I don't think any of us want, our funding opportunities to be limited, or our conversations on funding opportunities to be limited to just Prop 4. But since this is the Department of Water Resources program, and we're just able to provide a couple updates regarding that. And so I think maybe Lynn, would you mind sharing just I'll share my screen, but would you mind going through these slides real fast?
Sure, no problem. And actually, if Anne Marie is still on the line, these are probably slides that, well, this is from the Santa Barbara IRWM region presentation way back in October. So Anne Marie or Ashley, if you're still on, you could probably speak to these better than I. But this first slide is just the basic statistics and facts. And I did tune into the IRWM Roundtable of Regions meeting yesterday, and there was discussion about the timing. And Anne Marie, I think, cautiously, optimistically said that the money will, for IRWM, DWR's funding for IRWM, and which watershed resilience is now, that pot of money would be possibly coming out in 2027. But there is 154 million. You want to go to the next slide? See if that's in that slide, the 154 million, because that might actually be new information from, I think it is. I should have just asked Anne Marie if we could have her slides from presentation yesterday. But Anne Marie, do you want to say anything here?
I'm still here. Let me, I don't want to take up too much of your time with it though, because I did have a presentation on the overarching Prop 4 programs at DWR yesterday. And I do, before I talk about Prop 4, I do want to say I know we've been very quiet here, but we are listening intently to all that's going on. And we realize this struggle that we all have to keep the networks going, because they're everything with regard to this watershed resilience work. Let me pull up. Do you have specific questions, I guess, is one thing I would ask before I launch into this.
And do you want to confirm two things I took away from yesterday's roundtable meeting were 154 million for watershed resilience, and that applies to not only implementation but also to planning projects. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm that. And I can tell you that because bond funding is, focused on capital projects, the planning funding is going to be tied to an implementation project as well. So it'll be planning and then a little implementation at the end. And I think that will it'll feel good too for the folks doing the planning. Rather than share the presentation, I'm gonna kind of just scroll through it here on the side. I think
Can you stop?
Go ahead.
Oh, are you going to share? Can you share your screen?
Do you let's see. I'm looking. Okay, share. Zoom is.
Sorry to put you on the spot last minute.
No, that's okay. Is this sharing?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. So we just gave it an overview. I think 10 billion in funding total. I think you're all aware that we have the AB 35 pending, which will allow us to do guidelines. That's significant because it'll shorten the amount of time it's going to take us to get the funding to the public. There's going to be a 40% set aside to disadvantaged or vulnerable communities. And of that, 10% is supposed to go to severely disadvantaged communities. We have authority to issue or award advance payment up to 25%. And Prop 4 allows for reimbursement of indirect costs. So that's really exciting. That was plaguing everybody. And there's no cost share or match requirement in Prop 4. Let me know if this is just sounding like old news to everybody by now.
No, I think this is great. Thank you.
Okay. Prop 4 does not have an eligible or eligible cost list in it, so we're going to be defaulting to general obligation bond law. But some of the priorities and preferences in it are for projects that leverage private, federal, and local funding or produce the greatest public benefit. And there is preference for projects that utilize California Conservation Corps help. And then I went on to talk about some of the things people can start doing now, which is, I think, what you all are doing. So looking at the projects that you have that you want to fund, but pay special attention to the ones that have local or federal funding, or if you can get that, that will give you priority. And also you can start consulting with the California Conservation Corps now to see if they might be a good partner with some of these projects. I'll send this presentation to you, Lynn, to distribute to these folks. These were some common eligibility requirements across most of our programs. If you are subject to any of these requirements, just get all your ducks in a row now. If you do urban water management planning, water loss auditing, surface diversion reporting, have ag water management plan requirements, or any kind of SGMA program compliance, just make sure that is all in compliance. Our water use efficiency branch oversees the ag water management plans and urban water management plan updates, and you can check your compliance online here if you want to just check that out.
That doesn't apply to anybody in our watershed, I don't believe. They're too small.
Okay. There are some important new definitions and tools that we have out, new definitions within Prop 4, one of which is the definition of a disadvantaged community. And so it introduces the comparison area. So you're not just comparing the mean household income to this on a statewide basis, but to the more local area. We have DAC and SDAC mapping tools that are available now. And Prop 4 also introduces the definition of a vulnerable population. And those vulnerable populations would include tribal interests.
There's a question. Is block funding still considered by DWR under Prop 4?
No, it is not. It is not part of Prop 4. I do want to just read the specific definition of a vulnerable community, which is a region or community that faces a disproportionately heightened risk or increased sensitivity to impacts of climate change, and that lacks adequate resources to cope with, adapt to, or recover from such impacts. And then last but not least, this concept of direct and meaningful benefits to disadvantaged communities, severely disadvantaged communities, and vulnerable populations. They have to be, they can't be just incidental benefits. They need to be direct and meaningful, and we have documents that go into further detail about what exactly direct and meaningful means. Here is the distribution of funding. I only will be overseeing our watershed resilience and groundwater. Well, with the watershed resilience funding. Within our branch, we are going to be managing groundwater funding as well. And actually I'll get to that part later, but if you have questions about these other programs, I have an email address at the end of the presentation. You can send those questions to get more detail. And like I just said, yeah, we're going to be combining our groundwater and watershed resilience and conservation funding into one. Well, at the upcoming workshop on April 30th. I didn't say that clearly. I'm not saying we're combining the watershed resilience and groundwater solicitations, just we're going to be talking about both of them at the April 30th virtual webinar that we're planning. And at that webinar, we'll also be reviewing the results of the recent watershed resilience survey we had posted. These are the dollar amounts. There'll be 100 million for watershed resilience and 65 million for conservation that are part of this watershed resilience solicitation. And the three central themes, which you all know so well: climate resiliency, equity, and watershed scale planning. And I mentioned the implementation of planning projects. Here are the contacts. The first one is for getting on our email subscription lists. The second one is the grants portal for finding upcoming and open solicitations. The third one is our DWR wide funding opportunities. So if you have questions about those other programs, that is a good email address. And so that's basically what we reviewed yesterday.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that you were here and could do that on the fly presentation, and we will definitely distribute that PowerPoint to the council. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, we have 5 more minutes for just any like lingering questions, and then I can share our upcoming meetings. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I, greatly appreciate everyone being here today. Our upcoming meetings on May 14th, we will be having our leadership committee meeting for our Watershed Council, and this is going to be a great place to get into, bigger discussions on what's next for us. We can review the Watershed Coordinator work plan and consider how we'd like to work with and incorporate the WRP into the Watershed Council. That could look like, adopting it or approving it generally. And hopefully we will also discuss our charter and, discuss any revisions that we might make to it in terms of, what did we learn from this? Where are we having some gaps and how can we improve like our leadership structure? So yeah, look forward to that meeting. I sent out an invite to save the date on your calendar for May 14th. And then our regular council meeting will be June 4th. It will resume our normal schedule as the first Thursday of every other month from 9 to 11 a.m. It's hybrid, and yeah, we will bring some more topics of the adoption of the WRP. We'll vote, hopefully, and vote on any amendments to the charter. Yeah, thank you all so much. It's a nice thank you slide for the ending. But yeah, I can leave the space open again for any questions. But it's been a really great time working with all of you, and I'll see you at our next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.